Teachers of Reddit, what's the saddest thing you've heard a student say? A second grader told me that he was feeling weird and tired that day because he didn't sleep much the night before because people were shooting each other on his street, and his dad went out to see what was happening and didn't come back until morning. He was so worried he hadn't slept at all. Another student told me he couldn't take his ADHD medicine because his mommy sold it for food. Did a pretty standard scale drawing project where students measured and drew their bedrooms. A student drew squares along the walls, and when I asked what they were, he said they were the stove and refrigerator. Kid was sleeping in the kitchen. Many years ago I was teaching in a private school for children with emotional impairment and behavioral difficulties. I had a 6-year-old boy in class that had an upcoming court date about his by his mother's boyfriend. The happened when he was 4 years old. He looked at me with intensity and asked, "Do you think that the judge would let me go into rapist's cell and beat him up? I am so much bigger now and I have been practicing. Oh, and after, could I live with you because my mom wants to live with him when he gets out of jail and I won't be able to live there anymore? I'm sorry, I didn't take my meds today because mom sold them again. And is it okay if I stay in your room for lunch? We don't have any food in the house. I bought that kid bread, peanut butter, jelly and some snacks, and he made lunches and dinners for himself and his brother. I cried every night during that school year. I was teaching media, journalism, podcasting, video editing, etc. to students in Southeast Europe who wanted to better utilize social media to share what was happening in their countries. Think Arab Spring. One of my students from Burma mentioned sleeping with her father. I pulled her aside to have her clarify. Her father sleeps in bed with her and her sister to make sure they aren't kidnapped overnight and sold into the slave trade. Most sobering moment of my life. I remember when a girl in our class told the teacher it didn't matter if they learned it. She was going to be dead in a couple of years anyways. At the time I told my mom and she said the girl was probably just being dramatic, but the girl didn't come back after summer break. If I don't get a 90 in your class, my dad won't let me see my mom. My sister had a kid in kindergarten have a big breakdown seeing all the food getting thrown away after lunch on the first day. He had a bunch of siblings at home, and they were all hungry. It's the first time my sister cried at work. CPS was called and stuff happened. I taught my high school students in China to write haiku, 575 syllables. I came across this one from an extremely pleasant and soft-spoken kid while going through what they handed in. My dad told to me, "Harry, now delete mum's number." "Shut up, I will not." "Harry, 3A. Telling me I'm more of a mother to them than their mother. I had a few of those through the years. My mom told me she didn't pack lunch because it was too expensive. Gave him my lunch. Ex-wife taught first grade in a school district known mostly for trailer park crime. At Christmas, she had her kids write stories about the best thing about the holidays. One extremely impoverished kid wrote that he was excited that Santa was going to let him pick out a single box of cold cereal that would be his and his alone, and he could pick from anything in the grocery store. Mom was dead-ass broke, working 2 jobs trying to make ends meet, and food stamps were the only way she could get her 3 kids a present. She played this up and the kids got excited about this. I have 2 from the same open university in an economically depressed area. One, with tears, "Can I please turn in my paper next week instead of next class because my brother just got convicted and they're asking for the death penalty." Poor kid. That's a hell of a lot to handle at 18. 2. This was an essay on the topic of why are you here? The student, an older woman in a freshman comp class, wrote that she'd had her kids at a young age, and now that they were grown, she wanted to show them that she could still make something of herself. And even though her husband told her that he would leave her if she went to college, she came anyway. Thank God it was a diagnostic essay, because how the hell would you grade that? I just wanted to cheer and hug her. I was only sort of a teacher for 1 year. I worked at one of the national laboratories in the Bay Area, and as outreach we gave 2 science lessons each to all the schools in Oakland and Berkeley. On lesson 2 in one of the Oakland schools, from a 10-year-old girl who was clearly having trouble paying attention. "Sorry I wasn't here last time. My dad got shot." As a community college peer tutor, I've heard too many kids and adults tell me about their depression, anxiety, addiction, and bullying. For some reason one kid stuck with me. He told me about his autism and his love for writing movie scripts. He said, "I know they're not very good, so my dad always reads them and helps edit them." It was sad hearing him beat himself up about something he loved, but nice to hear that his dad always takes the time to go through long scripts with him often. Props to that dad for being there and encouraging his son. I had a student who was diagnosed with leukemia, went into remission, returned to school. Shortly after, his sister was diagnosed with skin cancer. A few weeks later, his brother was killed in a RTA. One day he came to see me and just hung around my classroom door. I asked him if there was something he wanted, and to come in. He walked in, sat down and simply said, "I just want it to stop. I don't know what I've done." Then he sobbed. We ended up crying together for the entire break. Absolutely heartbreaking. For context, I teach English as a second language in Hong Kong for secondary students at a pretty weak school. At this point I'd only been teaching for maybe 5 weeks. I was teaching the Form 1s, 12 years old, speaking lessons, and one boy had a really good attitude to learning English, and so I thought he would make a great addition to the English ambassador team to help me out around school. When I approached him after class, and asked if he wanted to join, the conversation went like this. Me: "Hey, name, would you like to be an English ambassador?" Student: "But my English not very good." Me: "It seems pretty great to me. And your attitude in class is excellent. And that's what's important." Student: "But there are much students better than me." Me: "I think you're more than good enough." At which point the boy starts crying, and obviously I'm quite shocked and am just like, "What's up? You okay?" To which he just says whilst sniffling from tears, "No one's ever said I'm good enough. They all told me my English was rubbish." That was heartbreaking for me to hear. He explained afterwards not only had his friends told him he was rubbish, but his teachers too. Know if this counts as I'm the one that said it, but I had a pretty tough time at school. I had almost no friends and buried myself in my studies. My tutor was this tiny angry Welshman called Mr. Evans, who I didn't think even noticed I existed, as I just kept my head down and had no interest in either of his subjects. Flash forward 5 years and I'm working a part-time retail job whilst paying to learn accountancy at a local college. One random Sunday, who walks in but Mr. Evans. He notices me, looks surprised, and comes over to talk. We shoot the shit for 5 minutes or so as he basically asks me how I'm doing, what I've done since 6th form, etc. Before he goes I tell him I'm surprised he remembers me after all this time, considering all the kids that must have come and gone since then. He looks me in the eye and says, "You always remember the ones you worry about. You once spent 10 minutes in one of my lessons arguing with me about what the point of anything was in the politest way possible. It's great to see how well you're doing now." Best student in the general chemistry class, by far, living in his car because he was basically disowned by his parents when they found out he was gay. He ended up sleeping on my couch and another instructor's couch for a month while we sorted out his financial aid and got him into some student housing. Not me, but wife. A couple years ago, a grade 3 kid whose birthday was coming up was saying how he didn't deserve a birthday, that he was a speck of dirt, that he was bad. It took a while, but my wife was able to figure out that when he was in grade 1 and at his birthday celebrations, his dad stabbed his mom. He had internalized this into somehow being his fault because it happened on his birthday. It was his fault that his dad was in jail and that his mom was so severely injured that she could no longer work. It was his fault that they had to move into a much smaller place. Really tough to hear. Kids should not have to deal with this shit.